Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video we're going to look at powder coating. I believe that powder coating is a very nice alternative to normal paint systems. Powder coating is not only very durable, but it's also a very easy way to get very nice and professional looking finish on your metal parts. And in this video I'm going to show you what powder coating is about, how it works, what you're going to need for it, and then we do a practical. And before we start, let me show you one piece that I did already. So on the table we have two parts. This is a cleaned part ready to be powder coated, and in this video we probably will do that. This one has been powder coated about an hour ago, and you can see the nice finish on that one. I opted to go for glossy black, but you can get all kind of colors, you can get all kind of finishes, and we'll talk about that. But as you can see, this looks pretty good. And you can still see the unevenness of the underground, but that is quite normal because the original piece is also very uneven. So I'm not going to bother sanding this down because this is a cast piece. But we'll do some other panels as well where we have a much smoother finish. But now I believe that powder coating is within reach of everybody, and it's not very hard to do. You just need to follow a couple of principles. But before we start, let's have a look what you're going to need to actually do some powder coating. And the first thing you're going to need is what we call powder. And here I have a bag of powder. It is all kinds of powder on the market. I think in total there's about 6 different types of powder that you can get. They come in different colors, they come in different finishes. You have powder for the outside, you have powder for interior work, you know, all kind of stuff. But what all powders have in common is that they need to have a certain curing time. So you'll have to put it in an oven for a certain amount of time at a certain temperature. And typically it's about 15 minutes at around 180 to 200 degrees centigrade. So let's put some powder in this spot. And you can see this is very, very dusty powder. Now for the sake of this demo, I'm going to be using powder which is having a high gloss and is used for the outside because I'm going to use it on my bare metal wishbones on the car, but also in this presentation I'm going to use it for the uprights and some parts of the brakes, as you have seen already. So just fill that up. Now typically you need about 250 grams of powder to do a complete rim of a car. So that is not a lot, and 250 grams runs you about 6 euros, so that is not expensive whatsoever. Now you got to make sure that you keep this absolutely dry. And now that's ready to go on the gun. Cleaning up the powder is easy. Just use your air gun and blow it away, as you can see. So once you selected the right powder for your specific purpose, for powder coating your parts, and your part could be aluminum, it could be copper, it could be steel, it could be anything. There's different powders for different purposes, and I recommend that you look on the different sites to find out which powder you're going to need. But putting the powder onto the object is something you can't do with a brush. It's something you cannot do with a paint gun. It's something you can't do by just putting it in there. It's all based on electrostatic charges. And we know that uneven charges attract each other. So minus attracts positive. Equal charges, plus, they push each other away. So we need to have what we call a powder gun. And there's 2 types of powder guns on the market today for the hobbyist and the semi-pro. One is based on the Tribo principle, and I'll come back to this in a minute, and the other one is based on the Corona system. The gun that I'm using is based on the Tribo principle. You got powder in a container which is being sucked in by compressed air, which is coming through the gun itself, and you regulate the pressure to the right amount of PSIs, and you try to keep it as low as possible. And then you have here a water filter, which you absolutely must have because you want to make sure that the air is absolutely dry so the powder doesn't clog up. So while the powder is taken into this barrel here, it's going to circulate in this nylon bush here, and it's going to be charged because of friction. So these particles are now being charged. They will come out by the air and they will be carried in the air towards the workpiece. And the workpiece is going to be grounded. So now we have charged particles flying around in the air, hitting the workpiece, which is charged, and they will stick to it. And I'm sure you've seen all this before. When you peel off a piece of plastic, sometimes it attaches to your body or to your pullovers or to your t-shirts. Well, it's the same principle here. Particles are charged and they will attach to the object that you're trying to powder coat. You'll see a ground on this one here, and this ground is really necessary to protect you from electrostatic shocks. The part that you're going to powder coat needs to be grounded, and that's why you have this kind of a plug, and this happens to be a European plug, but it doesn't really do anything. This is plastic. It doesn't take power at all. It looks like it, but it doesn't. But what it does do is it takes the ground from your grounding system in your house, because you need to have a good ground, and this grounding ends up on this clip. And this clip is attached to the piece that you're trying to powder coat. And there's another red wire going back to the gun itself just to protect you from anti-static shocks. And that's all there is to it. So this doesn't need no electricity, no nothing. This is a really good system. Now there is another powder gun which is working on the Corona principle. And the Corona principle is charging the powder coating particles with a high voltage. So you're going to need a power supply that generates 15,000 to 25,000 volts depending on the application you're going to use, and that will charge the particles before they come out of the gun. So it's very similar in the sense of the Tribo solution that I just showed you before. In both cases the particles are charged. The difference is that for the Tribo you don't need no power supply, you don't need anything really, just compressed dry air. For the Corona system, you're going to need a power supply, which comes with the kit, normally a power outlet, and you're going to need, of course, the gun itself. So now you're probably going to ask me, which system is the better one, and why did I got the Tribo system? Well, there's a lot of pros and cons on both. I think that the Tribo system is very good because the powder particles, they're getting in all to the little areas, and often you have like small holes, small openings, small gaps, and the powder gets in there very easily. And I think it's because the powder is less charged. On a Corona system, you're charging up the particles much more, and depending on what you set the voltage to, and they tend to push each other away in these small cavities, which is of course the Faraday effect. So equal loaded particles, they push each other away, and uneven particles or poles, they attract each other. So because all these let's say fairly heavy loaded particles with Corona are getting together in a small area, they tend to push each other away. So I prefer therefore the Tribo. But again, this is entirely up to you. But for both systems, you're going to have a good compressor with dry air. So you have to have a water separator, otherwise you're going to have issues. And the powder must be absolutely stay dry. So you better keep it in the house in a warm place. So now that we have the gun, we have the powder, we can start powder coating, right? Well, not really. You're going to need a couple of other things. You're going to need, of course, a protective mask, so you don't inhale these particles. You also will have to paint in a wind-free area. So if you have a paint booth, do it in a paint booth. If you don't, then that's fine to do it in your garage. Cleaning up the particles is easy, just blow them away or suck them up with your vacuum cleaner. That works pretty well. But once you even have now the part coated, and we'll do this in a few minutes, you still have to bake it afterwards. The powder has to cure. And depending on which powder you have, and in this case what we're going to do right here, the powder needs about 180 degrees centigrade as a minimum, and it has to cure for 15 minutes. So you have to have an oven. Plenty of ovens on the market today for powder coating, but they tend to be very expensive, and I'm not willing to spend that much money on it. We already got the gun for $250. The powder is about €6 for about 250 grams, which is enough for one 15-inch rim. So that's all reasonable. But the ovens, they run you between 1,200 to 2,000, 3,000 euros for a simple metal box with some insulation, a thermostat, and a heating element. I think this is insane, so I'm not buying this. Some people decided to make their own ovens, and that's great, but I calculated it, and if you're going to make your own oven, you're ending up with stainless steel panels maybe, or galvanized panels, a frame, insulation, heating elements, thermostats, and it's going to add up to easily about 250, 300 euros as well. Now, some people use an old oven from the kitchen and reuse these elements, and you can, but you still have to build the enclosure, and that's a bit of work, right? Now, it all depends how much parts you want to powder coat. How big are your parts? So if you're going to do big parts like I want to do rims, then you need to have a decent oven. So the oven in the kitchen, which could be very well used for smaller parts, isn't big enough for me. So again, it depends on what kind of application you want to do. So in terms of oven again, you need to be able to get up to about 200 degrees centigrade, and you have to be able to check the temperature, of course, right? So these are things you need to consider. So I decided not to build my own oven. It's too much work and it's cost me too much money. I do not want the oven in the kitchen because my girlfriend wouldn't be too happy with it, because you don't want to cook food afterwards in an oven where you have been doing some powder coating baking. So I went for an industrial food processing oven, and they are very cheap because you can get those for about 100 and 150 euros, because nobody wants those ovens privately because they're too big, and in the industry they want newer ovens, and the one I got had a fold on it. So you can fix the folds, but even if you can't fix the folds on them, you can still use them because they have good frame, they have a good structure, so you can rip out all the electronics, whatever, put an ordinary heating element in it if you have to, and a simple thermostat. That's all you need to have, and then you can reuse that oven for your own purpose. And here is the oven that I got for my powder coating, and you can see that this oven is fairly large because I want to be able to put in fact, rims of 16-17 inch. And look at this. I even got a rack that I can take out, full stainless steel. So that is nice. I can hang my parts onto that. So this is the advantage of an industrial oven, which you can get for peanuts. I have removed some of the parts because this was a steam oven, and I removed the steam part because you don't want to have steam in it. I also shut down the turbine. You know, this thing cannot run anymore, because you don't want to have air circulation in your oven when you are cooking or when you are curing your part that you just powder coated. And in the back you can see the heating elements. That's all there is to it, nothing more. So we'll use this oven in a few minutes. And like any paint job, powder coating also requires that you do prepare the pieces before you actually try to coat them. Now, in order to have a very good adhesion of the powder to the metal parts, you got to make sure that they are absolutely clean. So the first thing you do is degrease them completely. If you can shot blast them like I've done, then that is great. But if you cannot, you can just use abrasive paper. But once they have been shot blasted, you need to clean them up. And I'm using acetone for that. And I just degrease them all around. And I try not to grab it too much with my fingers because that's not good. Normally you should have gloves on. Now I'm using what we call a cloth-free lint. That's the kind of cloths that I use for painting in the paint booth, for paint jobs. And acetone is a very good degreaser, so make sure that it is absolutely clean. Right, so we can do all this, and then we can pick it up, and you can see we have some dirt on it. Not a lot, but there's still a bit on it. And then we can actually put this part in the oven, and the reason I'm putting it in the oven right now is to let it evaporate so we get all the humidity out of it. I'm going to leave it in the oven for about half an hour at 200 degrees, and then, and only then, I'm going to put it in the spray booth to put the powder on. So let me take this guy with me, and we put it in the oven. Some people call this gassing out, so to get all the fumes and the humidity out of the part. Especially on aluminum and copper and softer materials, that is important. On steel, it is less important. So I'm going to close the door and we heat it up, and we're going to let it sit here for about half an hour, and then it's about ready to be powder coated. That should be good enough, and now we're ready to start. So now it's going to take a little bit of time for the oven to get up to temperature, but you can see it's already going up fairly quickly. I'm going to have my coffee now, and then after that we come back and let's open up the door and let it cool down. So the part is now gassed out and it's cooling down a bit, and let's see how hot it is, the part. So as you can see, it's about 35 degrees centigrade. This is the right temperature now, and now I'm going to take it to the paint booth, and now we can actually start powder coating it. Now you want to preheat the oven while you're powder coating, so the oven is at the right temperature before you put the part in. So I'm going to set it to about 200. That should be good enough. And now it can start and heating up. Next is to connect the ground clamp onto the part, and I always do it in a place where it's not that visible, but once we're done powder coating it, we go in to remove the clamp and then powder coat that little area a little bit more. I have a reel here which is connected to my mains. The 2 pins don't do nothing, as I said before. You just need the ground, which is this pin right there. On your system that might be different. It depends from country to country, and they come in different plugs. So I'm going to connect the compressed air to the gun. I'm going to set my pressure to about, this is about 18 psi or about 1.2 kilograms. And I'm going to try to coat now. So let's see. And you want to do this as evenly as you can. Don't put too much pressure up. And this works, as you can see, very smoothly. You don't need to exaggerate with it. Now I don't have my mask on. Normally I would, but this time I didn't, just because I need to talk to y'all. So let me take the clip off and just powder coat that area where the clip was before. And that's it. So now I'm going to take the part in the oven. All right, so let's hang it in there. Okay, so now that's in the oven. Let's close the door and let it cook. The temperature in the oven right now is 202 degrees centigrade. The 15 minutes curing time for the part at 200 degrees centigrade is actually the temperature of the part and not of the oven. And that's why you need to check it every so often with an infrared meter to see what the temperature actually is of the part. So you have to open up the door, check it out and measure it. And once the part has reached 200 degrees centigrade, then it's the time that counts for the 15 minutes, not before. And as you can see, the powder has already started to melt basically and to cure. And we are now about, I would say, 8 minutes into the process, still running at 200 degrees centigrade. So I'm going to leave this for another 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to let it cool down and have a look on how it looks like. So as you could see, powder coating isn't all that difficult. So now the part should be about ready, and as soon as the alarm goes off, and here it goes, we can actually take the part out of the oven and let it cool down and then have a look at it. So we are now 15 minutes later and the part has been completely cured. And here's the part, still a little bit warm, but not that warm. Nicely coated, as you can see. So this looks real good. I'm going to give you a close-up, guys, so you can actually see how well the powder was flowing out. I think this looks real good, to be very honest. And here we have the parts before and after, and you can see the finish is really nice on this part here. Look at how nice dark that is, what kind of a gloss we have on it. So that is really looking good. I'm just going to get a light so you can actually see where the gloss is. And here you have a little bit of a close-up of the part, and I'm just going to run a light over it so you can see how the finish is. In fact, you have a nice finish on both sides. It's not that it's only done on one side. You see a small little thing on these corners, that's where the hook was. So I need to touch up that a little bit, but that's about it. So we are nearing the end of this video, and what I've tried to show you in this video is that with a limited amount of tools, and in fact very cheap tools, 250 euros for the powder gun and another 150 euros for an old oven, you really can get professional results. And that's what we're going to do on this race car here in the next episode on repairing or restoring the race car. We're going to powder coat the complete front suspension. So, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.